Hello, my name is Austin, and welcome to the story of my RSTI build. Like any project car, there have been many ups and downs. Ultimately, this has been over a 6-year journey, and I've certainly learned a lot. This is my 2000 Subaru Impreza 2.5 RS. I purchased it right after high school, after my Mazda Speed 6 blew up, and had intentions of creating an RSTI from day one. Inspired by the review of two in particular on the smoking tire. Though, I found that video greatly undercut how much work goes into the build. If you want to build an RSTI, it is not cheap. If you don't want cheap high mileage parts, this is going to be over a $20,000 build. You are swapping almost everything beneath the body of this car. When I'm done with this phase of the build, I'll be over $20,000 in, and I haven't even touched the body. So, the 2.5 RS, it has that iconic 22B looking body, and despite the lack of power, actually had pretty good performance for the time. Honestly, it was a great budget daily driver. It was fun to drive with a manual transmission, it always started in the winter, and I enjoyed the car, but it obviously needed more power. The first major modification I did was about 1.5 years into ownership. Some friends and I went and swapped the coilovers in the car. Pretty simple process, but it ended up taking us about 12 hours because all of our jacks broke and there were a few really stubborn old bolts that we almost didn't get out. But we got it done, and the handling was greatly improved in the car, much less body roll, and made it funner to drive. A little less than a year later, I had a shop in Des Moines that specializes in Subarus import and install a 6-speed JDM STI transmission along with the Brembo brakes. It was a good chunk of money, but I knew if I was going to add power to this car, I needed it to be ready to handle it. This and a new set of wheels completely changed how the car felt. Now, even more underpowered, it was funner to drive with more gears and even better brakes. The car stayed this way for a couple years until I found myself with a decent amount of money burning a hole in my pocket, but not quite enough for a full STI swap. Inside, I've been slowly eaten alive by not having a turbo car since my Mazda Speed 6 blew up. There is nothing that makes me happier than driving a fun turbo car, and it was definitely something lacking in my life. A friend of mine who has quite the obsession with Subarus did a relatively cheap turbo build on his 95 Impreza that wasn't STI power, but a long shot of a difference from the normal engine in my car. He came up with an engine formula comprised of different Subaru parts that would put out somewhere in the realm of WRX power, but for a pretty cheap price. Eventually, I gave in and the build began. The build began second semester of my junior year in college. A couple months were spent acquiring parts since it was Iowa in the winter, and even when we had all the key parts, the snow did not stop. The garage being used was a detached apartment garage with no lights and no power, and we were working on it outside of school and full-time jobs. Went with an SRS exhaust off of eBay for this project. Definitely a budget option at the time, only a couple $100. I think it may have gone up since then, but honestly ended up being a pretty decent exhaust. Happy with how it sounds and fit right in. As you'll see later with the STI block we picked up for the car, there were a couple of cracked rings, so here's some replacements for that. This is the Greddy E-Manage Blue. This was our first option for engine management, adding the turbo to a naturally aspirated car. Later you'll see it didn't quite work out and we ended up trying the E-Manage Ultimate. Adding in a couple of the usual gauges for a turbo build. We got a boost gauge and air-fuel ratio gauge going in. This is the gauge pod you can get for a 2.5 RS. It replaces the little cubby up in the top middle of the dash. And to finish off this shipment, if you want more power, you need more fuel, so we got an upgraded Walbro fuel pump. When it came to engine blocks on this build, we were considering a few different ones. The 2.2 liter was known to be fairly strong, so we were looking for that. But then a 2003 STI engine block actually popped up on a marketplace for a pretty cheap deal, so I drove 3 hours and picked up that. This is us taking it apart and inspecting the pistons and the walls inside the cylinders. Here you can definitely see where not having a power source gets a little annoying when working on a car. Did a lot of this project with headlamps being our really only source of light. For me, this is my first time really doing any extensive work on a car. All this definitely had me very nervous, but I was also excited. I've always wanted to get into the more detailed work with a car. Getting to see how an engine actually works and moves in person, not just watching a video, was pretty exciting, and I really enjoyed the process. Looking forward to doing more in the future for sure. Hopefully with a little less pressure, this being my only car. Here you'll see us taking out the pin that holds the piston assembly in the engine. Once you take that out, you can basically just pop that piston right out of the block.
There you go. Should be clear. Here she blows.
Good. So, just rotate the block. Rotate the block here. Take a video. Just rotate the block. And pop out. Nope.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, like that. Another one.
Ooh, that one's got a good old crack there. Ooh, look at all those.
Right there. Yeah, that thing got hard. Oh my god.
That answers that. I mean, at least the cylinder, what do you call it? Cylinder walls are in good shape or whatever.
Yeah, the cylinder walls look to be in good shape. Let's stop shining light on there. Go to that number 2.
Here's why.
Put new batteries in this one. This one's usually really bright. But if you look right there, see that?
Oh, yeah.
So if you can't catch it with your fingernail,
You can't.
yeah, if you can't, can you catch it at all with your fingernail? It's still pretty damn smooth, right?
Yeah, I call it pretty smooth.
It doesn't need to be bored.
Oh,
You can still see the crosshatch through it. See how it goes through still? So
Yeah.
the cylinder wall's still okay.
Sweet.
Right here. Opened right up to the
1 and 3 were. Yep, there's a big old hole.
That's for the oil ring.
Oh,
See how there's
never
a little
mind.
tab in there?
Oh,
You're looking at this part and this part.
okay. Yeah, it's pretty obvious the ones that were. Oh, 4's over there.
Yeah, see how there's a crack right there?
Oh, okay, so 1 and 3 were good.
Yeah, 1 and 3 are good. So. 2 and 4 really get rid of.
Nice and lubed up still.
Yeah, there's a little chunk of dirt right there. Okay. So we'll set that in there. Like so.
Oh, I see.
I'll take the piston. Insert the piston. So that way it's nice and even. That look even?
To my human eyes.
Alright, and the ring gap is supposed to be between 10 and 20 thousandths. So we'll go find 10.
Pretty small.
Can you see the 10?
Yeah.
So between 10 and 20 thousandths.
What's the bottom number?
That's your
So like your
millimeter.
okay, yeah.
So
Metric.
0.25. 0.25 to
0.25.
I always aim for the middle, so 0.15.
Yeah.
So we'll check that first. So the 0.1015. Right?
0.10.
0.15. So wherever our gap is, that looks really small. We'll probably have to file it with 10 thousandths. Yeah, we can't even fit 10 thousandths in.
Yes.
Just to show you how these work.
So after setting the ring there, we found that the gap left over is too small for the correct tolerance. So basically what you do is you just take a file and file down the ends until the gap is a sufficient size. So here's this pretty nifty piston sleeve that the hole slowly tapers down to the size of the cylinder. And what this allows you to do is you take your piston with the rings and everything, you put it in there, and then it slowly compresses the rings as that hole gets smaller, and all goes well, it just drops right into the cylinder.
Oh,
Ring's catching a little.
no.
Or,
The dot.
ooh, the dot.
The dot has to go towards the front of the engine. The front of the engine's right here. So this is the bell housing. This is the front. Correct. There it goes. Yep.
Like a glove. Yeah, boy. That's satisfying.
Mark goes this way. Cylinder rings. Good.
Yeah, that's smooth.
Then you want to hold the connecting rod here. Underneath the connecting rod so that it's centered. Oh,
Yeah, I was wondering. That's what I was wondering about earlier.
you see how the piston's a little crooked? Finger in there. Hold the piston. Pound it.